Hello, welcome back to Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. I'm James Pendleton and I'm here to talk today about Anthony Gordon's move to Newcastle United. It has been officially confirmed today that he has moved for, it looks to be between 40 and 45 million pounds, depending on who you listen to. I mean, Everton have said it's undisclosed as they often do, but it appears to be maybe 40 million pounds with 5 million pound in add-ons, but I think that sort of ballpark. Obviously, 5 million does make a bit of a difference for Everton at the minute, but the most important thing is that it appears to be at least 40 million pounds, which is a lot of money. I think, obviously, in football at the minute, fees are massive, but Everton have only spent more than 40 million pound once. That didn't go very well, but they've only done that once, and they've only sold 3 players for more than this in their entire history. I think the 5th player along the line in terms of most expensive transfers is Wayne Rooney, so it does kind of show how big a fee this is. He's behind only Richarlison, obviously John Stones and Romelu Lukaku, and when you compare Anthony Gordon to those 3 in terms of how good they were for Everton, he is certainly the outlier. I think if you go for Everton's top 10 most expensive departures, you've got Fellaini, Luka Dean, Idrissa Gana Gueye, Rooney as I mentioned, Julian Lescott, Moise Kean, I think, is the other one who's obviously going to go in the summer. I think he's 9th, so he's only just about in there. But in terms of, other than Moise Kean, he's probably made the smallest impact overall, you have to say, at Everton. So for all these things, it's a really good deal for Everton. They need the money, they need to reinvest in this squad, and I think beyond the first 8 or 9 games of this season, Anthony Gordon has not done very much at all in the blue of Everton, but we're obviously talking about the actual transfer and sort of how we got to this point, lessons that have been learned, lessons which I think we can learn going forwards, lessons that players can learn. There's loads of things that I think are really interesting about this deal. I think first and foremost, people are saying that Anthony Gordon is not worth anywhere near that amount, and I would obviously agree in terms of where he's been this season. He has regressed, which means that Everton getting pretty much the fee they would have got off Chelsea, it seems, in terms of, I think they only actually bid around that amount. People said they could have gone up to 60 million, but it didn't happen. So I think we're quite lucky in that sense, because we reject that money and you're looking at, say the Southampton game when he comes on, doesn't do much at all, gives away the free kick for the goal. People would have been thinking that they would have taken probably half that amount, but it's interesting Newcastle have come back in and they've made the signing, and they've paid the actual money for it. So we're lucky in that sense that the player has actually had a poor half season realistically overall. I will come on to that in a minute, but they've done that and they still made money, which is big progress for Everton, because as I will mention shortly, that doesn't always happen, so that's why it's good. Everton have got Dwight McNeil, they have got Tamari Gray as well, and they have actually not really been playing with wingers recently. It's been very much a 5-back with Tamari Gray and Calvert-Lewin up front, which then means, obviously Ellis Sims and Neil Maupay and Tom Cannon before them were kind of preferred in those roles. McNeil and Gordon haven't really been in the scene, but obviously now with Sean Dyche coming in, you imagine that Everton are going to play a 4-4-2, they're going to play wingers, they're going to play 2 strikers, so the need to get a winger in is now much more than what it was. Everton don't appear to have anyone coming out of the academy at this moment in time who can play out wide. Lewis Dobbin is probably the only one, but obviously he's out on loan. No one really knows where Stanley Mills plays. Players like Katai, Kiarte, I'm not sure they're going to fully make it with the first team, so it means Everton need to go out and replace Anthony Gordon. Essentially, if they were still playing a 5-back, you could say perhaps not, but obviously now you think you need to. So that's it from a kind of transfer perspective. From Anthony Gordon's perspective, he's been at Everton since he was 11 years old. I did a lot of research on him in the summer when I wrote something for him for a website, and you're going through and you're looking at how highly rated he was throughout the age groups. He obviously played in the second sort of famous Everton dead rubber game. Obviously, we had Bartek Borisov when Hope Akpan and Kieran Agard and Shkodran Mustafi and all them played, and obviously we had the one. So we had 3 European dead rubbers. We had Krasnodar as well, where like Ryan Ledson and Gefan Jones and Chris Long, etc. played, and then obviously we had Apollon Limassol, where I think Benny Bedingame, Callum Connolly, obviously Anthony Gordon, Fraser Hornby, maybe they all played anyway. So it's kind of one of them where he came on and you're thinking, yeah, this lad's 16, he's already in the Everton setup. They rank him and rate him highly enough to take him away to this game and bring him on with not too long to go. He progressed through the age ranges there, did really well at under 18 level, struggled a little bit with the step up to the 21s, played a little bit in the first team, went out on loan. Carlo Ancelotti threw him in and played him a fair bit at the back end of the lockdown season, not so much the next year, and I think that is when he went out on loan to Preston. The manager got sacked there, or moved on at least, and it was slightly different for him. So Anthony Gordon, I think, ended up being rushed through, I think it's fair to say, and I think you could see when he played under Rafa Benitez he wasn't 100% ready, but he needed to be because Everton needed bodies, they needed someone who was a little bit different, and I felt there were a big part of his game where he was getting better, and I felt like he was going to be ready for the first team. He scored 2 goals against Brighton in a game that Everton obviously lost. One of those was a deflected goal, which became a bit of a theme for him last season, where I think 3 of his first 4 were deflected, or one actually hit him and went in. Scored another one in that game, but I felt as last season went on, Anthony Gordon was a very important player for Everton, and I think that I would love that if he'd moved on to say, you know what, he's moved on, but we can kind of remember what he did for us last season, but obviously recent events mean that probably isn't going to happen. But I felt he played a big part last year, and that's why Chelsea came knocking. I think every Evertonian knew he wasn't at Chelsea or Champions League level yet, of course not. He was a mid to lower Premier League quality player, with the potential to go and do that. Chelsea were rebuffed in their chance to sign him. He started the season quite well for Everton. He scored against Aston Villa, it was disallowed. That's right in the middle of the transfer saga. He scored against Leeds, he scored against Brentford. I think maybe in reverse order. I think Brentford was the first game, and then Leeds. He earned his 2 crucial points there. And then, as I say, as Lampard's system changed, he chopped and changed what players he wanted to use. And then by the time he came back after the World Cup, Anthony Gordon hadn't played a whole lot of football, and that carried on really. I think he's played 2 or maybe 3 90 minutes since Halloween, which, you know, for someone who was, I think, you know, you have Richarlison, Pickford, you can maybe argue someone like Alex Iwobi, and then I think you are looking at Anthony Gordon in terms of our best players from last season. I think he won Young Player of the Year as well, of course, which obviously not too difficult, but I think in terms of where Everton have found themselves this season, Anthony Gordon really isn't to blame, and I felt the reaction towards him at some games at Goodison has been really poor. I really couldn't understand it myself. He was getting a lot of stick in the summer for Chelsea putting bids in for him because he didn't leave. I couldn't believe it really. I thought it was unbelievable, some of the things that people were saying about him, and it made me think, you know, we've begged for a young player to come through the academy. There'd been, really no one since Tom Davis, and before him Ross Barkley come through it at the youth levels and starred for the first team. John Joe Kenny was in there, but he was never good enough. So I really couldn't believe the stick he was getting up until this week, pretty much. That's what upsets me about this whole thing, because I feel like Anthony Gordon worked really hard last season. Appeared not to kick up any sort of fuss. Last summer went on, people said he downed tools, but he scored 2 crucial goals, playing in a slightly strange position up front against Leeds and Brentford, as I mentioned. So I was disappointed at the way a lot of fans reacted to him at that sort of time, and I'd be interested to know why. Maybe if you were unhappy with him at that point, why that was. He then had fans mobbing his car. Obviously that's only a small minority. Of course, after the Southampton game, I can understand people were frustrated. He came on and gave away a lazy free kick, and I think that's just kind of where he ended up being, because his performance had dropped. He wasn't in the team, and I think we could kind of see his heart wasn't really in it by the end. And then obviously this week's come and gone. He appears to not turn up for training. He seemingly handed in a transfer request, which the club have now confirmed, which obviously is, you know, if it's 2 things up to the club, it's about that really, you'd have to say. That's as bad as it gets in terms of wanting to force your way out. I think Everton were probably quite happy. I think it meant that they get the full fee for him, and that's what they have done. So I think, to sum up Anthony Gordon, his time at Everton, I think he did well last season. As I say, he regressed as this season went on. He became less and less important. He became more of a bit part player, and by the end, I think he was just showing signs of frustration. But I do think the way some Everton fans turned on him last summer, and as this season went on, I think was quite poor, if I'm being totally honest myself. That's just how I see it. But then maybe you feel, if that's your case, maybe you feel more vindicated by how this week's gone. I totally understand that. And yeah, it's sad because I think when a player comes through the academy, you want them to be there for the whole career. But I think what Everton fans have realised over the last 5, 6, 7 years, that doesn't always happen. In fact, that's getting rarer and rarer in football. And Everton have had a real bad habit from Matt Pennington, Callum Connolly, Tyus Brown and Luke Garbett, John Joe Kenny, some may say, all these players who came through the academy or maybe joined at a young age, like Garber, for example, and we didn't get rid of them quick enough. And I think Everton have not jumped at the first chance. They wanted to see how he got on, but then they've said, you know what, he has regressed slightly, he's not playing as well as he was. Let's kind of cash in on him and let's move on. That's what an academy should be for. At the end of the day, I spoke about this when I was on with the lads the other night. Teams like Arsenal, they produce players out of the academy, but then when they are not at that level, they quickly decide to move them on. They're not the only club who do that, obviously, but I think teams like Barcelona are obviously renowned for it, but they get so many players coming through the door. I'm sure there are others I'm just kind of forgetting, but I think it's a big step forward for Everton to get a massive fee for a youth player, and you just hope that if Ellis Sims isn't good enough to play for Everton within 6 months to a year, you can say, you know what, 5-6 million, you can go play in the Championship, and that should be how this academy goes. It should be a conveyor belt of players. Some will go and play for the first team, some will move for good fees, and that should just be the way it is, rather than some will play for the first team very rarely and some will stay in the system until they are far too old to be playing for the youth ages. I think that is a positive step. So overall, I'm sad of the way this has ended, but Anthony Gordon, I think based on the statement and how short it was that Everton read out, appears to have ended this quite poorly from his part. Not turning up to train with Leighton Baines is obviously a massive no-no for all Everton fans, or for anyone. It doesn't matter if it's Leighton Baines, but just the fact that they had that relationship. But I think the fact that over the last 6, 8, 10 weeks he's not played as much, and when he hasn't been great, means that this is a massively good deal for Everton. Shall we get on at Newcastle? I think there's definitely something there. Dan Ashworth doesn't just sign anybody, nor does Eddie Howe. In terms of since he's gone to Newcastle, I think he's really tightened up the players he's signing, because he signed some shocking players at Bournemouth, but for big fees. So I think this is a good deal for everyone. I think Newcastle are getting a decent player who will get better, no doubt about that. He's got potential. There are things in his game he needs to improve, and there are things that I think he's already on an upward trajectory for. Let's see how it goes on, but let's hope Everton first and foremost reinvest his money wisely, and we can move on from this messy saga, and let's learn from this. Players that are in the academy, we don't want any more Thierry Smalls, but we also don't want any more Matt Penningtons or Callum Connollys, in terms of we keep them for way too long and that's the club's fault rather than the players. So overall, a great deal for Everton. I'm really happy that we've managed to get it sorted, so long as we reinvest, and obviously it's great for FFP and all those other things. Let me know your thoughts down below. Let me know what your views on Anthony Gordon have been, are now, and are going to be in the future, and obviously let us know who you think we should be targeting to replace him with. Otherwise, you'll listen to the Toffee Blues. Make sure to like, subscribe, and also check out all our socials in the description. And yeah, thank you very much.